A human soldier rescued the alien queen's little girl and received a shocking offer in return. The sky above Xipheron was on fire, which was not unusual for a Wednesday. Plasma storms rolled in lazy spirals across the ash-gray heavens, lit by streaks of anti-orbital artillery carving trails between jagged mountaintops. The ground shuddered as something large exploded in the distance. Probably a tank, possibly a very unlucky goat. Either way, Sergeant Dane Carson didn't have time to care. He was elbow-deep in wreckage, tugging at the bent steel of what had once been a Vraxian personnel carrier, and now resembled a tin can stepped on by a cosmic toddler. The HUD on his helmet blinked irritably, signaling dangerously low oxygen, ammunition reserves at tragically comedic levels, and morale marked as somewhere between May and panic. He ignored it, gritting his teeth as he pried open the hatch. This mission was supposed to be a fast recon sweep. Get in, get the beacon, get out. No drama, no surprises, no royalty. He'd just freed the last bolt when something inside hissed at him. Not a mechanical hiss, not hydraulics or overheating coolant, but a furious, distinctly sentient hiss. And then he saw her. She was crouched behind a fractured stasis pod, gripping a small, fuzzy creature with one glowing eye and an uncomfortably cheerful grin stitched onto its mouth. Her skin was a soft mauve shade, bruised with soot and speckled with cuts. She was about the size of a human 8-year-old, though the long pointed ears twitching from her tangled hair suggested she definitely wasn't from Earth. Her eyes, big, luminous, and suspiciously shiny, met his. She snarled, bared tiny sharp teeth, and flung a piece of twisted metal at his head. It bounced harmlessly off his helmet. "Back! Meet snouted Earth creeper!" she screeched in perfect galactic basic. "I am Princess Lyra of the Vraxian Ascendancy. Touch me and suffer 1,000 years of imperial retribution." Dane blinked. "Well," he muttered, "you're definitely not from the mailroom." Another explosion shook the ruins, followed by the crackle of a voice on his comm. "Carson, we've got evac incoming in 6 minutes. You find anything?" Yeah," he replied, ducking as the girl, Lyra apparently, attempted to brain him with a busted handheld holo player. "Found a princess, very stabby. 10 out of 10 attitude." There was a long silence on the other end. Then, "Please tell me that's code for a broken data core." "Negative. Small. Sentient. Threat level. Emotionally volatile." Another boom echoed, closer this time. Dane looked at the little alien girl, who was now growling and attempting to operate a plasma cutter upside down. She was injured, scared, and whether she liked it or not, he was the only thing between her and the rapidly approaching Vraxian kill drones lighting up his motion sensors. He sighed. "All right, Your Highness," he said, slowly lowering his rifle and pulling off his helmet to show his face. "Rule number 1 of surviving Xipheron: don't get killed. Rule number 2: trust me to get you off this rock, and I'll throw in a chocolate ration." Her eyes narrowed. "Is that the brown rectangle thing that smells like despair?" He nodded solemnly. "That's the one." With a huff, she tucked her fuzzy creature under her arm and limped toward him. "Fine, but if you betray me, I'll have your spleen turned into a diplomatic appetizer." "Noted," he said, scooping her into his arms. She immediately tried to bite him. He was halfway back to the evac site, dodging plasma bolts and navigating a particularly judgmental crater, when Lyra leaned in close and whispered, "My mother's going to vaporize you." "Oh?" he asked, ducking behind a jagged rock as a drone zipped overhead. "She doesn't like humans," Lyra added helpfully. "She says you smell like old soap and rebellion." Dane chuckled despite himself. "Can't argue with that." The dropship came screaming in low, wind from its thrusters, whipping through the smoke and debris. Dane bolted the last 50 meters, Lyra clinging to his vest like a particularly sarcastic backpack. His squad stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "What the hell is that?" Corporal Juarez demanded as he stumbled aboard. "Royal baggage," Dane wheezed, collapsing into a jump seat. "Do not poke her." Lyra smiled sweetly and held up her plush companion. Its eye glowed menacingly. The hatch sealed. The ship roared upward, breaking atmosphere in a trail of scorched air and confused cursing. As Dane finally allowed himself to breathe, Lyra settled beside him, watching the stars reappear through the viewport. "You're not entirely useless," she said grudgingly. "Thanks," Dane replied, massaging a fresh bite mark on his shoulder. "That means a lot coming from someone who just tried to sell my spleen." She smiled. It was sharp but not unkind. As the moon of Xipheron burned behind them, Dane couldn't help but feel that something had shifted. He didn't know what he'd started by saving her. He didn't know what kind of empire he'd just stepped into. But he knew one thing for sure. He really needed a shower. And maybe another chocolate bar. Dane Carson had expected to be shot the moment he set foot on the Royal Varaxian flagship. Not ceremonially shot, just the regular kind. Preferably in the chest, maybe twice, with some kind of alien plasma thing that boiled your insides and smelled like burnt fruit. Instead, he was met by a small battalion of silver-armored guards who stared at him like he was a bad odor someone had tracked across the velvet floors. One of them actually sniffed. "You smell like rust and carbohydrates," the guard muttered in Varaxian. "I get that a lot," Dane replied in Basic, adjusting the collar of his patched-up field uniform. "Must be the stress sweat, or the granola bar I shoved in my boot 3 days ago." Princess Lyra stood beside him, still holding her plush, one-eyed beast, now wearing a tiny cape she'd fashioned from a trauma blanket. She looked uncannily unbothered by the grandeur of her surroundings, probably because she'd grown up in it. Dane, on the other hand, was trying not to gawk at the floating columns, the walls made of solidified starlight, and the scentless vapor that glowed faintly and whispered news headlines when it brushed your ear. They were led through winding corridors and anti-gravity lifts, past holographic guards that watched and bowed and somehow judged silently all at once. It was like walking through a museum built by people who considered subtlety a form of weakness. Then the doors opened. Not slid. Opened. Tall, arched, and made of translucent obsidian that shimmered with galaxy maps. 2 guards stepped aside with synchronized disdain. Queen Jara stood in the center of a platform that hovered above a sea of light. A crown of thin golden wires spun around her head, seemingly of its own accord. She wore a robe that looked like molten chrome and a smile that suggested she was trying out civility for the first time and wasn't entirely sold on it. Dane saluted awkwardly. "Sergeant Dane Carson, ma'am. Brought your kid back, mostly intact." Lyra elbowed him. Jara's eyes glowed softly, like the aftermath of a solar flare. Her long ears twitched in slow contemplation. "You disobeyed military orders, endangered your squad, interfered in a royal extraction protocol. Also gave her half my water and let her use my helmet as a dollhouse," Dane added helpfully, "which, by the way, is now full of glitter and crumbs." The Queen's smile didn't move. "And yet you returned her to me unharmed." Dane shifted, was kind of hoping for a thank you, or maybe a souvenir. Queen Jara descended the platform in 3 silent glides. She stopped inches from Dane, examining him like a curious bacterium. "Human, you fascinate me." "That's either flattering or terrifying," he said. "Possibly both." Her gaze didn't waver. "You saved something precious to me. For that, I owe a debt." "I mean, a medal would be fine," Dane said, scratching the back of his neck. "Maybe a fruit basket? Something that doesn't come with politics or lasers?" Lyra giggled, hopping over to stand beside her mother. "He told me if I screamed again, he'd invent a new swear word." "Which I did," Dane muttered. "Flargnobble." "Look it up." Jara turned, gesturing gracefully. A holographic model of the galaxy bloomed in midair. Varaxian sectors blinked in shades of blue and silver. Human-controlled territories, far fewer, flickered in desperate red. She spoke, her voice lower now. Serious. "The war has reached an inflection point. There is an opportunity, small, delicate, for a new direction. One that requires a symbol. Someone unexpected. Someone that both sides see as other." Dane frowned. "Wait, you want me to be a symbol? I once tried to put my pants on backward in zero gravity and got stuck for 3 hours." "You intrigue the masses," Jara said. "A soldier with no agenda, a rescuer who should have left. You could be useful." His brain took a moment to catch up. "Useful how?" "A liaison, an advisor, a voice in the Empire, at my side." Dane choked on air. "You're not, hold on, You're not proposing, are you? She arched a single elegant brow. Not romantically, though we do share genetic compatibility at a 72% threshold. That's oddly specific and deeply uncomfortable. I ran the numbers during your descent. Of course you did. The offer hung there, absurd and enormous. A human soldier at the heart of an alien empire. The war could pivot, peace or something like it might follow. Or maybe it was a trap so complex it made his teeth hurt just thinking about it. A side door hissed open, interrupting the moment. An older Vraxian male burst in, robes askew, breathing heavily. Your Majesty, he cried, urgent communique from Sector 9. The rebellion has struck the gravity farms. Dane turned slowly. Did he say gravity farms? Yes, Jara said, already gliding toward a new holodisplay. Where we grow gravity? Dane blinked. Yup, I need a drink. And a manual. Possibly a therapist. Lyra tugged his sleeve. You'll do fine. Just don't let anyone offer you blue pudding. It's alive. And with that, Sergeant Dane Carson officially became the first human ever invited to sit in a Vraxian council meeting. He really hoped the chairs had lumbar support. It turned out the Vraxian council chamber had chairs made of semi-sentient moss that adjusted themselves to your body's preferred posture and, disturbingly, sometimes your emotions. Dane Carson's chair had already shifted 4 times. First into a combat stance, then a fetal curl, followed by a suspiciously judgmental upright spine lock, and finally what he could only describe as lazy recliner with trust issues. Every time he moved, the moss muttered passive-aggressive comments directly into his lower back. Spine tension detected. Suggests emotional growth. Thanks, Chair, Dane muttered. Real supportive. The chamber itself was shaped like a giant spiral, tiered in glimmering rings of alien alloy that absorbed sound and light in unnatural ways. Floating data panels followed each council member, displaying information in Vraxian sigils that looked like a spider had spilled its ink in anger. Holograms danced midair, planetary readouts, diplomacy metrics, and a rotating diagram labeled Human Digestive Processes, which Dane hoped was part of a science exhibit and not a dinner plan. Jara sat at the central helm, poised like a thunderstorm in the shape of a queen. Her voice carried through the chamber without amplification. It didn't need it. We stand at a turning point, she said, her words elegant, sharp-edged. The rebellion threatens our outposts. The humans grow more desperate. And yet within our walls stands a human who chose mercy over war. Every head, or equivalent cranial structure, turned toward Dane. Some were subtle. Others leaned in with mandibles clicking or eye stalks quivering. Dane gave a casual wave. Hey. Yep. Still breathing. Jara gestured to him. Sergeant Carson has been granted ambassadorial status for the duration of our peace initiative. Dane stood, half expecting to be booed or lightly vaporized. Instead, he was greeted with a mixture of hisses, one slow clap from something with 6 fingers, and a polite sneeze from a being composed entirely of light and pollen. He cleared his throat. Right. So peace. Big fan. Love not dying. Would recommend. 5 stars. A few snorts. One outright giggle from a counselor with glittering scales and a voice like wet balloons. Dane continued. Look, I know what you're all thinking. Why is there a human here? Good question. Frankly, I'm still figuring that out. But I did save a princess, survived a plasma drone ambush, and gave up my last chocolate bar. So I'd say I earned a seat, or at least the right to keep my spleen. He paused, glanced at Jara. Still keeping my spleen, right? For now, she replied without looking up from a data slate. Reassuring. The council dissolved into conversation, which Dane learned was a mix of telepathic pings, audible murmurs, and low-frequency pulses that rattled the fillings in his teeth. While they debated rebel attacks and galactic treaties, Dane was left to observe the surreal grandeur of Vraxian governance and dodge political assassinations by Buffett. The council's snack table, a gravity-defying wheel of edibles that spun slowly near the back wall, held a variety of treats. Most looked harmless. One, however, blinked at him. Don't, Lyra warned suddenly at his elbow. She wore a diplomatic tunic and an expression that said she'd seen too many things for her age. That one tries to mate with your tongue. Dane backed away slowly. She looked up at him. You're doing okay. Mother hasn't threatened to execute you yet. Yeah, that's oddly encouraging. Then came the interruption. An emergency transmission flickered into the center of the chamber. A rebel broadcast. Grainy, chaotic. A human face appeared. Weathered, scarred, and familiar. Dane, the voice rasped. If you're seeing this, it means the Vraxians haven't killed you. Yet. We know what they offered. We know what Jara's planning. She's not after peace. She wants control. You're not their guest. You're their puppet. Don't play their game. Help us strike. We're ready. We need someone inside. The message ended with static, then silence. Jara stood, expression unreadable. The rest of the council glared at Dane with renewed interest, like he'd grown extra limbs or just announced he was contagious. Lyra tilted her head. That was your friend? Dane swallowed. Former commander. Used to yell at me for double-dipping rations. Jara's voice came soft but sharp. You will explain this. Dane looked around, the weight of alien eyes pressing on him. He'd been here less than a week, and already he was being pulled in two directions. The familiar past and the treacherous future. He forced a smile. You ever get the feeling you're the only guy at a party who didn't read the invitation fine print? No one laughed. Even the chair went rigid beneath him. And for the first time, Dane felt a chill crawl down his spine that even the moss couldn't cushion. Welcome to diplomacy. Dane Carson had always believed that honesty was the best policy, right after don't lick alien batteries, and never trust a smiling customs agent. But standing in the middle of a royal Vraxian war room, flanked by high-ranking officials who could crush him with their minds, or worse, with administrative paperwork, he was rapidly rethinking that life philosophy. The walls flickered with war maps, planets outlined in pulsing red, star routes clogged with skirmish data, holographic fleets repositioning themselves like predatory insects. At the center of the display hovered the message from the human resistance, replaying in stuttered loops like a bad commercial. Dane, we need someone inside, over and over again, like a guilt-flavored ringtone. He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding Queen Jara's eyes. She was perched on her throne platform again, ears twitching ever so slightly, which Dane had learned was a Vraxian sign for mild to moderate homicidal irritation. I swear I didn't know they were going to broadcast that, Dane muttered. We haven't exactly been sending each other holiday cards. Jara's voice was level, but cool. Your former commander knew exactly where you were. That implies surveillance, coordination, possible infiltration, possible embarrassment, Dane added. I mean, the guy called me a puppet. That's just rude. You laugh, snapped Counselor Velk, a skeletal being with translucent skin and a voice like a malfunctioning airlock. But this is not a game. This message undermines your position. It endangers our plans for peace. Dane held up both hands. Look, I get it, but I didn't invite the rebellion to hijack your intergalactic C-SPAN. I'm just the guy who saved the princess and occasionally burns toast in the diplomatic lounge. Actually, Lyra chimed in, materializing beside him like an interstellar shadow. He also taught the food synthesizer how to make pancakes. They are weird, but addicting. Jar regarded her daughter with a blend of fondness and quiet horror. Your loyalty to the human is noted, however misplaced. He gave me syrup, Lyra said solemnly. You don't betray someone who gives you syrup. Dane gave her a quick thumbs up. Thank you. Finally, someone understands the ancient law of breakfast. Still, the tension in the room didn't lift. Even the moss chair beneath him had gone uncomfortably firm, as though bracing for impact. Jara finally rose. The situation is unstable. We must determine your loyalties, Sergeant Carson. Test away, he said, trying for bravado, and only sounding slightly like he'd swallowed a moth. Blood sample? Brain scan? Karaoke night? She didn't smile. Instead, she gestured, and a thin beam of light lasered down from the ceiling, forming into a tall, metallic capsule behind him. Enter, she said. That's not ominous at all. It's a thought resonance chamber. We'll review your memories, analyze intent, observe your actions through neural recall. Dane stepped back. Okay, so brain karaoke then. Lyra leaned in. It tingles. Also, don't think about clowns. They get amplified. Great! Fantastic! The chamber slid open with a hiss, releasing a puff of vapor that smelled like cinnamon and mild dread. Dane stepped inside. The door sealed behind him, and the world went quiet. Then it wasn't. Suddenly, he was on Xipheron again. The smoke, the heat, the chaos. Only this time, he wasn't in control. He watched himself dive into the wreckage, saw little Lyra curled up behind the stasis pod, her tiny face bruised and furious. His own voice echoed back at him, raw and unfiltered. We don't leave kids behind. I don't care what species they are. The memory shifted, flashes of his squad arguing, the dropship ascending, Lyra biting his shoulder mid-flight. Then another memory, earlier, hushed voices in the resistance tent, his commander, the same one from the broadcast. The Varaxians won't stop until they've absorbed every system. If they offer you anything, it's a trap. Smile, accept, then detonate from within. Dane flinched. He hadn't remembered that part. Or maybe he'd chosen not to. The chamber went dark, then light again, then opened. Jara stood waiting. Well? Dane asked, stepping out, heart racing. Did I pass your science fiction polygraph? She stared at him for a long time. You're conflicted. Tell me something I don't know. You seek peace, but you fear betrayal. You've lived in war for so long, you mistake survival for strategy. That sounds like a fortune cookie I once got, he said, brushing mist off his jacket. Except the cookie tried to bite me. Lyra giggled. Jara turned to the council. The human is not without flaws, but he speaks truth. His intentions, however muddled, are not treacherous. The chamber rippled with tension easing, just a notch, enough that Dane dared to breathe again. And then, because life had impeccable timing, the room's warning sirens blared. Unscheduled breach, barked a voice. Hangar Bay Theta, multiple life signs, armed. Jara's eyes narrowed. The rebellion. Dane blinked. Wait, now? Here? Lyra handed him his sidearm like a waitress offering extra condiments. Welcome to the Empire. Hope you brought ammo. He hadn't, but he did bring sarcasm, and that at least was loaded. The firefight in Hangar Bay Theta was nothing short of a galactic food fight, if the food in question was high-powered plasma and the pies were heat-seeking. Dane Carson dove behind a stack of Vraxian energy crates, which, according to the glowing red glyphs, were either explosive ordnance or an aggressive type of alien cheese. He didn't have time to check. Above him, rebel ships had punctured the force field with precision strikes, slipping in like interstellar eels. Human operatives spilled into the hangar, shouting coded phrases and ducking behind sleek transport haulers. Their armor gleamed with makeshift insignia, burned flags, scratched resistance logos, the occasional scribbled joke, if found, return to Earth. Jara moved through the chaos like a storm goddess sculpted from moonlight and malice. Her long ears flicked as she gave orders in a tongue that sounded like collapsing metal and whispered riddles. Even in the middle of an invasion, her posture said, "Try me, I dare you." Dane was about to jump into the fray when Lyra appeared beside him, holding a sleek alien weapon that looked far too large for someone who had once tried to ride a medical droid like a pony. You said they wouldn't come, she said, eyes wide, voice teetering between betrayal and awe. I said they shouldn't come. Big difference. You humans are very good at saying things that end up being wrong. He offered a grim smile. We call it optimism, or bad luck. Together they moved from cover to cover, firing only when necessary. Dane was careful not to hit anyone he recognized, which wasn't easy, since most of his old squad was now either trying to overthrow a monarchy or posturing like they were in a space soap opera. The rebel leader, Commander Harlan, the same man who had hijacked the broadcast, appeared amidst the haze, his scarred face glaring through the visor. Carson, he barked, you're coming with us. We've got a clean extraction window, 10 minutes before this place locks down. Dane looked at him, then at Lyra, then at the Queen, who was currently disabling 3 rebels with what looked like a decorative scepter and very poor manners. I can't, Dane said. Harlan's eyes narrowed. They've brainwashed you. No, but they did run a memory resonance scan, which is kind of like therapy, but with more lasers. Point is, this isn't the same mission anymore. What are you talking about? I'm talking about a chance to end the war without turning the galaxy into a barbecue pit. Jara wants peace, real peace, not the let's hold hands while stabbing each other in the back kind. And you believe her? Dane shrugged. I believe her kid, and I believe I've seen enough blood to last 3 lifetimes. For a second, Harlan said nothing. Then he raised his blaster. Sorry, Sergeant, can't risk it. Before he could fire, a pulse bolt knocked the weapon clean out of his hand. Jara stood behind him, her scepter sizzling. That was not a request, she said icily. Dane sighed. Thanks. Again. Jara gave him a sideways look. You remain inconveniently durable. The rebels were rounded up, not killed, but detained with a surprising amount of dignity. Dane insisted on it. Jara allowed it. For now, it was a start. 2 standard weeks later, the Varaxian capital had undergone a transformation. Where once there had been polished paranoia and decoratively lethal architecture, now there were banners of unity. New councils were being formed, human representatives appointed, rebel prisoners released. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it wasn't a war zone either, which by galactic standards was a win. Dane stood on a high balcony overlooking the starport, sipping a fizzy green drink that tried to taste like lemonade, but mostly reminded him of guilt and lime. Lyra joined him, now dressed in something that might have passed for royal armor if it hadn't been half covered in doodles. One shoulder bore a painted Earth flag, the other, a cartoon pancake with a crown. Mother says she's rewriting the peace treaty, she said. She keeps using your sarcastic tone in the phrasing. I'll take that as a compliment. She also said she might not vaporize your planet. Dane raised his glass. To small miracles. A beat of silence stretched between them. I heard you turned down the title, Lyra said. Yeah, Grand Human Emissary of not getting shot was a bit much. So what now? He exhaled slowly, watching ships lift off toward newly opened skies. Now? I stay, help build something worth keeping, translate a few idioms, teach the council not to hold meetings at 0400, and maybe, he grinned, maybe start a pancake shop. Lyra laughed. You're weird. I get that a lot. Behind them, Jara approached. She wore no crown, just a simple tunic of dark silver, her long ears half tied back in what passed for a diplomatic bun. You've complicated everything, she said without preamble. It's a gift. And yet, it is working. I'm just as surprised as you are. She glanced at Lyra, then back at Dane. We may still face war. Old wounds do not vanish in a fortnight. No, he agreed, but someone's got to be first through the door. Might as well be the guy with the dumb jokes and good pancakes. Jara nodded, slow and regal. You remain inconveniently human, he grinned, and you're inconveniently starting to sound like one. The stars above pulsed. The moon of Xipheron remained scorched in the distance. A reminder, not a tomb. And in the heart of an empire once built on fear, a strange new alliance flickered into being. It was flawed. It was fragile. But it was real. The end.